So welcome everyone to this panel today. We're going to be talking about sort of game industry futures. We're going to be exploring, the current state of the industry and kind of trying to gaze forward a little bit about what's happening in the current climate and maybe some future directions that are quite exciting for the industry. So we're going to be talking about the current state of the industry and where it feel it's going, so a bit of future casting there. And we'll try and touch upon some of the more trickier subjects as well, such as the sort of current state with the layoffs, some of the contraction that's happening in the industry, as well as, the thorny issue of AI and its usage in the game development process. And we hope to shed some kind of light on what's happening right now and give you some perspective from my colleagues from the industry here who will kind of give their insights and their experience of what's happening and hopefully give us some nice talking points as we kind of go through this panel. So what we'll do is we'll go through some introductions. My name is Brian McDonald. I'm the head of subject for the games programs at Falmouth University. So I effectively run and organise the programme. So I'm responsible for pretty much everything from game development all the way to art. And what we'll do is we'll go from my left all the way to my right, and can I get each panel member to introduce themselves, say what role they have in the industry, and say maybe some of the experiences they've had in terms of ship titles or things they're working on currently.
Yeah, me first. Okay, brilliant. My name is Ross Everson. I'm currently an animator at Rebellion, as well as a committee member at Limit Break Mentorship. I'm currently working on something I can't talk about, which is classic. But previously, I've worked on both Sea of Thieves and Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin. Yeah, I think that's me.
Cool. So if you can't talk about it, does that mean it's going to be good?
Oh, yeah, always.
So my name is Mark Morris. I've been in the industry for about 27, 28 years. I'm not very good at maths, which means I ended up in production. So my background is I've worked in publishing, I worked in developers, I worked at EA, I ran European publishing for Microsoft about 10 years ago. And then I was most recently at a company called Splash Damage. I was president there, where we did a lot of Gears of War, Gears 4, Gears 5, Gears Tactics, Halo Master Chief Collection. So a lot of big AAA games as a co-dev partner for Microsoft. And most recently, I left Splash Damage and co-founded an investment firm called Supernova Capital, and we buy and sell game companies. So it's been an interesting couple of years. We've had some big ups and some pretty big downs recently.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you.
My name's Geo, or Geo Higgins. I'm pretty fresh in AAA. I work at Jagex as a character artist, but prior to that, I did bit of indie work with maybe like 15 people-sized teams. One of them was working on an MMO, and then prior to that, I was working in quite a small team, working in mobile. That's about it pretty much.
Hi, my name is Matt Webster. I'm the founder and CEO of a new studio called Fuse Games, which I started in January of last year. I've started making games in 1990. I spent 32 years at Electronic Arts, making a boatload of different types of games. Most recently, prior to founding the studio, I spent 10 years running Criterion Games. So I've made Burnout games, I've made Need for Speed, I've made Star Wars games, Battlefront 2. I wrote the design for the original FIFA game back in 1992. It wasn't called FIFA then. Done loads of different types of games.
Thank you.
My name's Alex Beddows. I am currently the principal environment artist at That's No Moon. Previously to joining here, I was a Respawn as a senior, shipping Jedi Survivor. I've been in the industry for like 12 years, but it's been like a very strange 12 years, not all AAA, some in mobile, some in indie, some in iGaming, but for the past 6 years, it's been AAA.
Cool, thank you very much, and thanks panel for introducing yourself and giving some insight about that experience you've had. And there's some kind of varied experiences we have here, so it'll be really interesting to hear some insights as we go through these questions. So the first one is a bit of an opener, and I'm just going to open it out to everyone to kind of talk about their own points of view here. So what exciting directions do you feel the industry is moving towards? And I think we'll start from Ross and we'll work our way along again.
So I'm setting the tone.
Yeah, setting the tone, Ross.
I feel like with a lot of things that are happening right now, I think honestly we're going to see a resurgence of indie again, which I think is really beneficial to some people here on the panel even. Because I think with a lot of stuff that's happening right now with layoffs, like a lot of talent is being sort of launched into the space where there's a small amount of jobs right now. And I think that creates innovation and, exciting new games that we'll see coming in the future. I think there's going to be like a second renaissance of indie games like we had back with like Super Meat Boy and those sort of games. I think that's what we're going to see again, personally.
Yeah, thanks, Ross.
Yeah, I probably generally agree with that. For me, though, I think there's a slightly different angle because I do agree that, one of the silver linings on the clouds of the recent layoffs are going to be the birth of new ideas and new studios. But I've been particularly interested in what's coming out of the Roblox universe. I think it's actually starting to prove itself, or it's at least getting recognized as a fantastic test bed for really interesting ideas. And I think the recent success of the game Lethal Company is a great example of somebody who honed their craft by making games, getting it in the hands of younger kids, to be fair, but really learned something and then applied that to sort of the graduation platform, which is Steam, and has found incredible success. So that dynamic of being able to play around in a new platform, Fortnite's going to be doing something very similar, starting to do something similar. I think that's going to be another, flavor or color to what comes out of the indie space, and I'm really interested in seeing where that goes.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, that younger audience as well, who've grown up with Minecraft and now Roblox, and all these are platforms that people are going to develop on, and
they're game developers.
Yeah, they're
right?
game developers.
They're 12-year-old game developers now.
And they're shipping.
Yep, and they're shipping, and they're making money, which is crazy. But I think that's a sign of where the industry is going to continue to go.
I think I'm pretty much the same view as Ross. I'm really excited to see more indie games come out of these spaces, especially since so many high-level or like very talented people have been laid off. Just generally really excited.
I suppose a bit of that. I mean, I've been around long enough to have seen a bunch of these things happen, as is Mark, and I think that some of those patterns do replicate themselves. Also, what I think is most surprising for me, or not surprising, but because there was a trend, but it feels like for me now, the sorts of games that I'm used to making, large scale, I suppose what you call AAA, who really knows what that means. I think that it's much more credible now that you have a smaller core production team and then you bolt on capacity and capability and specialisms. And certainly in this country, that's where I see a heap of opportunity for people who want to work on multiple types of games, not necessarily not everyone's got an opus within them, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of desire to work on many different things, and there's a great way that you can do that through working on other people's games. And the reality is you get better at making games the more you make. So if you're going making one every few years, there's a limited number of. So I look at it, there's a limited number of games left within me, I think. But for other people, that you can hone your teeth, you can learn different things, you can see different things, and that's super exciting, I think. So for all the students that are coming into an industry, it feels like a little bit but actually the reality is it's still the largest by far entertainment medium on earth, and it's not contracting, it's just not growing as fast as people thought it was going to.
And I think that a lot of people say the COVID sort of bubble, and this is a bit of correction.
Yeah, and that's every industry went through that.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm most excited for is this from more of a tech and I guess potential standpoint is we're reaching a point with all the layoffs and everything is every studio is kind of going back to the drawing board. Tech stacks have they've been making the same type of games for nearly a decade at this point. And with the recent innovations from Unreal, we're seeing everyone's having to relearn how to make games. Like professionals with 20 years experience with some of the biggest titles in the world me as an environment artist, I'm having to relearn how to make environment art. And we're at this point where, obviously the layouts are terrible, and I think part of that is people having to figure out what the next generation leap is and what the next big tech innovation is. And I'm excited from the perspective of, I remember when normal maps first came on the scene, and it was like everyone had to relearn how to make games. Like games took this huge monumental leap, and I feel like we're on the precipice of that. Like when we get out the other side of this bad patch, I feel like there's going to be another big monumental leap in tech, in our visual qualities, how we make games. It's very interesting.
It's like that shift when we went from 2D to 3D. There was a lot of relearning and new innovations coming out, and lots of opportunities for those coming into the industry to kind of get ahead in those sort of technologies.
Well, with that, it's quite funny because there's people coming into the industry who know more and are more useful to a team than people with 10 years experience, because Nanite really has, and not just Nanite, there's lots of tech coming on board, procedural tech, PCG, it's just turned a lot of roles on its head, and there's juniors who are far more capable and useful to a team than experienced artists.
That's super interesting. Yes, thanks for that, all. So now I'm going to open this one out. So one of the things that like many students are now concerned with is with the layoffs and the decreasing, or the perception of a decreasing job pool. Many students are concerned with the state of the industry and what it means for their chances of breaking in. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to get into the industry, bearing in mind that there's that bit of anxiety about where we are right now? So what would be the advice? And I'll just open that out to anyone who wants to take that one.
I went through this in 2012, like when we had a bit of a crash then, and I didn't get my foot in the door in AAA until I was already in the industry for about 6 years. I think something that helped me a lot is get a creative job. Like find a job where you still get to grow as a person, grow to work within teams, sharpen your artistic eye. I started in mobile games, serious games, making educational content using game technology. It still allowed me to learn tools and learn to be efficient, and productions and Jira and all these horrible things. I slowly worked my way up into AAA, because during the time, games was in a really bad place. And a lot of my mentees I work with at the moment, I give the same advice. They ask the exact same question. Like, the industry's in a bad spot right now. What are my chances? And I'm having to be very honest and say, yeah, it's very difficult right now, but don't give up on at least getting a creative job, so where you still get to, exercise that part of your brain, and you can carry on developing to grow towards the role you actually want. I think it's very easy to be despondent and throw your hands in the air and say, okay, it's hopeless right now, I'll go do something else, which is completely non-creative. And I think that's a massive shame. Like, there is a lot of disheartened artists right now. And the best thing I can say is just try and find something where you get to scratch the itch in one way or another. Even if it's, one of my friends went into, he's an environment artist. He's currently working in a photography studio, processing film. Like, okay, fine, that may not be what you wanted to do, and that's completely fine. But at least he's still doing something. He's still learning about aesthetic. You're learning about images. And one day that can come full circle and help you. So I think just because that's what I did, that's the only reason I can give that advice. That's what I did. I left a construction job and went and worked in mobile. Don't, at least try and get a role which is creative, even if it necessarily isn't in games. Because every field needs a creative person one way or another.
I think also I could say about that as well, because I graduated from here in 2017, and my first games industry job was 2021. In that time, I tried to keep up my animation skills. I actually ended up teaching game development at one point, because like you were saying, staying in that creative space and having, scratching that itch is super, super important. I actually took the student game that I was making here at Falmouth and worked on it for another 6 months afterwards, and then released it on Steam. It wasn't successful or anything, but it's my first interview that I got at my first industry job. I was just talking about all my recent stuff that I'd done. I went and did online courses and stuff. And the senior animator was like, "Oh, I've just seen this Karate Crab game in your portfolio. What's that?" And then he's watching it in my interview, and he's like, "This is really cool." And that was something that I did in between uni and my first job. And it actually kind of paid off. It wasn't the best thing I ever done, but it was showing that I could sort of keep going after the fact and create something. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. And that was pretty good for that, I think. Just staying in that kind of headspace. but I had a job that wasn't specifically that.
These are both really great examples of what I would say is, I think, an essential life skill that everybody has to go through when they start off in their career, which is resilience. You've got to develop resilience. And I think it's especially important in the creative industry, because what you're trying to do is, a lot of people want to do this. I mean, it's a lot more crowded than what it used to be. And what's going to separate you from somebody else who also wants this job is resilience. And it's also, the second piece of advice would be to focus on what you're good at, right? Like, find something that you're really, really good at and lean into that. The more you can stand out for being really excellent at one thing versus kind of good at a bunch of things, I think you're going to have a better opportunity to find a role. But, so I can go on and on about things. And this is largely based on my own experience as well. I think that resilience is also about relying on yourself, right? Like, if you're looking for other people to help you, you're probably going to be let down more often than not, unfortunately. So you might get lucky. Sometimes you get lucky. But if you rely on yourself, develop your own skills, hone your skills, stay resilient, stay passionate, figure out what you're really, really good at, get really good at that. Eventually, somebody's going to recognize that and go, let's give this person a shot.
Any other advice from panel?
Yeah. I mean, it's never going to be a straight line going from uni. It's going to be really difficult. And I think my experience is quite similar to Ross's, in that I started in the kind of like adjacent games kind of area, and then went into lecturing for a little bit, and then moved over to mobile. So I was doing so I'm a character artist, and I was doing a lot of generalist artwork. So it didn't perfectly align, but I was still in that kind of like space where I was still being creative and still exercising that. There was another point that I forgot.
That's a great. I'm going to lean on that one because you mentioned something about generalism. So if I've just gone through this, trying to bootstrap a studio, and you can't afford specialisms. It's a luxury, and I kind of think you almost don't want it anyway, because they like to call it T-shaped people. It's pie-shaped people, I think. So deep subject matter expertise on something, but a broad range of capabilities that have got some depth, so you can bridge those gaps, right? And this is why I really love what's happening here, because you're going to make a team. Originally, you're going to start with constraints. So I've got a limited amount of time, and maybe I've only got one engineer and 3 artists. What game am I going to make with that? And then you go at that, and you make something, and you find a way through. And it may just be that. So everyone I meet asks 3 questions of what's your earliest game in memory, and we have a conversation about that. What's the game that made you then think, how am I going to get into? There's an industry here. I quite like that. And then the third one, what's the way in? And you're right, it's never a straight line. And so many times I speak to people and they're studying to be, let's take an animator. One of our technical artists started as an animator. Didn't even know what a technical artist was. There's so many roles. And then someone came in and talked about what job they did. And went, that's me. I want to do that. So this is, I think, one of the reasons I'm here, or we're here, to try and say, it's more than just the one thing that you might be focusing on that you think is the area that you want to go in. Have that open mind and think about applying yourself in a slightly different way. And then you broaden your reach and then makes it much more attractive. Because if I've got one person and we've got a spot for one person, and we've got someone who's got a range of skills versus someone who's got massively deep subject matter expertise in one thing, I might choose the range.
Yeah, because if say you pivot away from a certain technology or a certain thing, then that person might have to re-skill up, whereas a generalist could probably push themselves in different directions.
And I think when you're thinking about generalism, you've naturally got an open mind. Versus, no, this is the thing that I want, and I'm going to go after that. And that's great, because mastery is a brilliant motivation for someone. But that open mind and being willing to learn new things, and Mark says about resilience and taking the knockbacks and applying that in a different way, and thinking about what you want to do in a slightly different way, that's really attractive.
So thanks, Phil. So we're just moving on to the next question. This is the one that's a kind of hot button topic right now, and it causes a bit of anxiety in certain areas, certainly writers and artists. So we're going to talk about AI and certainly its usage in the industry. And I think what we're seeing is things like large language models, the ubiquity of them and the ease of use of them compared to previous kind of AI tools. It means they're becoming more and more used in, just general sort of culture, but they're also getting used in the game development process. So there's a lot of bigger, larger companies that are adopting this, and also indie companies who are also adopting it as a sort of cost-saving exercise or a way of, ideating and various other things. So what do you think there is a place for AI in games, or do you think it's something that you would rather avoid? And I think I'm aware that this could be a contentious issue, and I'm more than happy to hear all sorts of opinions on this because people have different viewpoints. So I'll just open it up for a starter. So who wants to start?
Who wants to start?
I'll have a shot at it.
Yeah, go for it.
When I made Star Wars Battlefront, there was 475 people on that team.
Mm-hmm.
It was an insane amount of people just chewing through, creating a lot of amazing content. Mm-hmm. The reality is, I think games of that scope and scale will get fewer and fewer because it's just too expensive. And you're starting to see what the first party studios where you've seen a lot of closures because the reality is they used to operate on different game economics, right? Because it's a first party studio, so it's there to sell hardware. So the realities of, if you're looking at evaluating a $300 million to make Spider-Man 2, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this is sensational. But if the last game was 150, what's the other 150 gone? Because it doesn't look twice as good at, do you know what I mean? So I think that the reality of large teams will adjust and change. And so then you think about, okay, how do I make that scope and scale and the vision and deliver that with a smaller group of people? And the reality is the tools will get better and AI will become a tool. Where we are right now is, you can't put a game out on Steam if you've got AI generated content until certainly in the US that copyright law is solved. To copyright something, it has to have human input. So if you've generated it with an AI, you probably can't get copyright on something. There's obviously all the provenance stuff at the moment, which is, if I went to a concept artist and say, I think take this inspiration, that inspiration, and that inspiration, and create this thing, and they'll go and do Google searches, and they'll get all that visual inspiration, and then inside their brain they craft the image. The AI is kind of doing the same thing. It's just you can see the provenance, which makes it much more difficult because you can see the inspiration. So until those things get solved, that's going to be a problem for these tools to become used. I would, for anyone using tools right now, take a lot of care because the reality is in many of the terms and services, you actually don't own the output. So take a lot of care. And by the way, you're giving off the input. So take care and be cautious. But this is a train that isn't going to stop. But it will be able to navigate it, I think, and it will become a tool for people once we get those constraints and understand real capacities. If you're trying to write software with an AI, I mean, the debugging part is the problem. Because certainly when I tried to do it, it's like, I'm going to try and figure this out. I sort of described a problem, and it was a decent enough output, but he tried debugging the problem without a memory. It's really hard.
I'm really excited for AI.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love the games industry is it's the combination of creativity and technology, and the fact that the technology constantly changes underneath the creativity makes it the most dynamic creative industry in the world. I mean, film technology stayed the same for 100 years, right? Until it went to digital. Games technology, 20 years ago, people were building their own engines, and now you've got two very good off-the-shelf options in less than 30 years. So that pace of evolution is just going to continue, and AI is just another step along that path. And for me, I think, step one is with any kind of disruptive technology is like, what's your attitude towards it? Well, like from my standpoint, I look at the past. People that embrace disruptive technologies find new opportunities, find new business opportunities, find new creative opportunities. The ones that master that the quickest are going to succeed. So rather than be afraid of it, figure out how you can use it, figure out what it can do for you. I mean, everything you're saying, there's all legalities, all that stuff is true. That stuff will work itself out. But that's the petri dish of we don't know. And inside that petri dish, that's where creativity thrives, I think. So I don't have the answer beyond that, but I think that somebody somewhere is going to do something. And we're all going to go, why didn't I think of that? Oh my God, that's amazing. And it's going to create some new experience. So I'm broadly very excited about it.
I think I'll be the token artist on the panel and say, like, part of me just always asks, like, where does it stop? Where does, like, this AI come in? And, well, yeah, like, game development is the perfect blend of maths and art, in my opinion. And I feel like part of the art can be taken out of it if you are using something that isn't human to create it. This is just how, like, I feel about it. This doesn't represent my employer. This is the sort of thing where it is like, I think as a tool, there's like certain tools that I use where it's like something I move in Maya will then move the thing after it. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Is it AI? I don't know. Is it? It might be. So it's like, I use that to help create something a bit quicker, but it's not replacing my job. And I think that's probably where I'm a bit like, well, are we just going to have a games industry just like with 3 people in each company and they're just using AI to create everything? That's where I feel like the magic of game development is going to start disappearing a little bit. And then I think, personally, that's, again, like I said before, where we're going to have more indie companies like popping up, and they'll probably say things like, this was not made with AI. And I think, you know, it could become something of like a marketing tool. It's kind of like when you see that game recently that's been made with stop motion animation instead of, I don't know, 3D or 2D. It's like, it's going to become a gimmick, which I think is kind of a shame, personally. Because, yeah, it's just like, where does it end? Like, where does AI stop and creativity start? That's how I feel about it.
I guess there's a tension here, Ross, that you've talked about. Like, you use a tool to kind of help you do some of your work, and I think there's a school of thought that AI is just that other tool.
Yeah,
you know?
it's not. I don't. Yeah, it's not black and white, is it?
Yeah,
it's like it's a weird like fine line there. But to me, like, art is made by artists, by human artists. That's how I feel about it.
I think just to answer your question, like you said, where does it end? And like, I've experimented with AI, and it ends when it becomes useless. Like it's funny, you can create a whole lot of tats right now and very little with, like, if you look at cinematography, right, in movies, you don't just shoot a shot with a lens and you grab like any lens from like Jessup's or something and shoot, and there we go, we've got a shot. There's a lot that goes into creating a shot. There's bokeh, there's the way the fall off works and focus, all these sorts of things, these very nuanced things that you don't know what you're looking at. And we're meant to, as artists, imply to the audience. The audience is not meant to be aware of the tricks we're doing. And unfortunately right now, AI can't do that. AI is great at, like, I literally have no clue where to start. Let me throw doo-doo against the wall and see what sticks. But that's 5% of the process, because once you get like an idea, then we actually start being artists. You have an art director saying, right, okay, cool, this is a good shade. Now let's start refining it. And as soon as we actually start getting to the point of using art to actually inform our ideas and grow our ideas, in my experience up to this point, it's almost useless, because when I ask for a very specific thing, like this stage right now, I don't want you to have yellow social trends. I want it to be a certain shade of orange, this exact shade. If I type that into AI, you got new shoes on now, and you've got a different haircut, and you've got a different shirt, and there's a different person sat in the end. And I'm like, great, this was great for me to generate a very broad idea. But for me to refine this into a product, it's been near impossible. Now, one thing I will say about the software thing, which has been very funny, is it did teach me Houdini. I would type in a very specific, like, I came from substance designer, tried to learn Houdini. I was like, it's visual programming, it'd be the exact same. And nothing behaved the way I wanted it to. And I'm like, why won't I literally would type in, why won't this function work? And it would come up with a bunch of reasons, and of the 15 reasons, one of them tended to be true. And I managed to figure out and troubleshoot and learn. Now, if I said to Houdini, I want to do this pipeline where I create buildings using XYZ, useless. Couldn't even begin to take into considerations all the complications working with Unreal Engine and working in a production pipeline and making a product and making something that's, all these sorts of things. So AI is very superficial right now. It's very, I'm not saying this to like sound sensation, it's useless right now. To actually make a product to finish, it gets you 5% of the way. And and one thing I will say is, if you looked at where AI was 2 years ago, it was even worse, and it made a lot of big leaps in 2 years. and maybe it'll make even more big leaps. But we can't get people to replicate the nuance of the like artistic masters that we have right now.
That's a great point. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I actually did this thing because I typed in. So I had an art director and me, and what we were looking for was we wanted output, but he would describe an output in a completely different way of me, because he would talk about composition and what lens type he wanted and where they wanted what sun was, and so he used the language of art to talk to the AI, and it generated a way better result than it did for me. So it's not people think that anyone can do it, and I don't think that will be true. It will be because I think they'll fix all the memory and these bunch of things, but it will still be a supplementary tool for the talent that will direct it. So,
it's a new
programming
programming
I don't see it. It ain't
language.
going to replace you. It will augment you, right? So that's how I see
If it's like a tool, then it's but it seems like that's not the language being used by a lot of higher ups and big companies. It sounds like it's more of a let's use it to time save, and then what you're seeing with the industry, that's like the language that's actually being used. I think that's quite dangerous, because if it was just a tool, we just talk about it like it was a tool.
Yes.
But we're not. We're up here on a panel talking about now. So
it's also, you don't talk about tools, about where we get our content from. So one of the big issues I have right now, like I worked for ArtStation for a year. That platform I owe my career to, but the fact that they, for example, don't take a stand against this, they don't stop people scalping from there. Now, other companies have seen that as that's the core issue for every artist. The core issue is, where do you get your data? And right now it's from everyone's artwork, and nobody consents to that. Now, other companies are making smart moves. So, for example, Ubisoft have explored this, where they have such a big data set across all their games. Right, our data set we're sampling from is our own content. And we will, with so many examples of world building, and so many examples of composition in any Ubisoft game, like how many Assassin's Creeds have there been? And that's interesting to me. I'm like, okay, now we've solved what my fundamental problem with AI is, which is the morality about where you get content. Companies are already starting to learn from that and say, okay, if that's the core issue, how can we solve that? And now that's a very luxurious position, because there's not many companies with a data set like Ubisoft, but it's a start point to go, right, okay, if we're not okay with scalping artwork from other artists, is this a okay solution? And everyone's going, yes, that's a fair choice. And I think that's the other thing which we haven't spoken about, which is the morality around it and about where we get our content from.
Yeah, I think the morality is one of the things that's kind of to catch up in all this debate. Is so the usual, Silicon Valley disruption kind of side of things is like build the technology and then figure out the consequences and the use.
Creativity is built on copying. Yeah. Copying, combining ideas and transforming it into something else. So we've all, you learn to play piano by copying something. So I think I understand the reason why it gets emotive. Yeah. So I do understand when people are, it's like when Google came along and suddenly, we were making Burnout 2, and we were talking about we needed a peer, and we had a play. It was the inspiration of the place was Southern California, and someone put Brighton Pier in it, and it's like, well, it didn't look right, does it? Because it's not inspired by the location. And suddenly you've got Google, you can go and search for these images, and and you're using that for inspiration. And you're potentially even, you're copying the design and the construct of something that exists in order to, create the illusion of a believable world. And so it's quite difficult right now, because there's a lot of emotion in it. And I think we have to get used to a little bit of that.
I like how this
probably churning
conversation
for a little while.
This conversation has sort of turned into what's the nature of art. At its core, because I think that I often think about the issue of effectively scrubbing ArtStation and borrowing images from other people, and how that is that commercialized? How can people be compensated? It sort of is reminiscent of, I don't know, the arguments in the late 80s and 90s when rappers were sampling, right? And like what was constituted a sample. And I think they started to define it in terms of the seconds, or like milliseconds to a certain extent. And some of that stuff is so abstracted, like I didn't know that was sampled from the Beatles or whatever. But there's a valid concern there, I think. Like you can't just steamroll over that, attribution of originality and the lifeblood of artists is the compensation for that, right? So you don't want to remove that livelihood, because otherwise people aren't going to be motivated to do it. I end up sitting on the fence because I can argue both sides of these points, right? Like, because history has been defined exactly what Matt was saying by copying. The fact that you are inspired. They're like, artists today scrub ArtStation through inspiration, but because it's been done digitally, suddenly it takes on a slightly more menacing tone. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm an eternal optimist. That's why I fall on the side of, you know what? I think we're going to be okay. We'll figure this stuff out, because at the end of the day, it's going to be theoretically in service of creating a product. And if the people that are involved are compensated fairly and people are entertained at the end of the day, the process by which it gets made sort of goes into the background. And I'm hoping that, with AI, that we're going to see in some way, shape, or form new versions of that. I can't prove it, but I optimistically hope that's the case.
Certainly, with the speed it's moving, we kind of like
even if it's just speed, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's just an accelerant.
Yeah.
There's one point I will make about that, which is so I had this conversation with a friend, and we had the word emotionality brought in, and I was like, "You're right. You can't use emotionality as part of a very pragmatic discussion." My view on AI is it's a very selfish perspective of, you're right, people do copy, but we copy and we add and we iterate. And one of the issues I have right now is AI can't take something and make it better. It can take it and re-jingle it into something new, but it's making it better. And I think that's where I draw a line of, I want things to improve and be the reason art makes big dramatic leaps. In fact, anyone in here got a portfolio review with me, I said, do not take reference from existing games. You are like, a game is imitation of life. And if you do an imitation of an imitation of an imitation, suddenly we just get something very not great. Pretty much, I don't think I've seen a single example of it where I go, oh, you did an exact copy of something that already exists. Oh, that's actually better. I prefer that to the original. Very rare that happens. I always say, see something, be inspired by something, but it should be yours. You should do something new. You should put a twist on it, add your flair to it. And I think that's where from an established point, I want to see art improve. And I don't think right now, in the current way we use AI, we're not improving art. We're fast tracking people to get to the point of improving it. But I think the way it's being used right now is not like that. It's, I just need something. I just need an image here. I don't really care what. Like some marketing companies have done it terribly, where it's like, I need a banner, and rather than pay a graphic designer to make a banner, AI make me a really cool summer banner. Yeah. And they use that, and you just go, wait, it looks like AI. And not in the sense of, it's crap. It's just soulless. It lacks taste. And it hasn't. That's where my issue is. I want to see art get better. I don't want to see it just be derivative.
Excellent. And on that note, we're now out of time. So I'd like to thank my guests here for an excellent discussion. So can we get a round of applause, please? Hopefully everybody enjoys the rest of EXPO, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you again.